Most people think American tanks in World War II were inferior. Thin armor, weak guns, easy targets for German Panthers and Tigers. But that's only half the story, because tanks like the Sherman weren't built to win one-on-one duels, they were built to win wars. From the early M3 Lee with its strange dual-gun design, to the mass-produced Sherman that dominated entire battlefields, and finally the M26 Pershing, a tank that could go head-to-head with Germany's best. So the real question is, were they actually weak or just misunderstood? Let's break them all down. M2 Medium Tank. The M2 medium tank was one of the United States' first serious attempts at a modern medium tank before World War II. It was developed in the late 1930s, with production running from 1939 to 1941, totaling around 112 units. The design reflects pre-war thinking, focusing heavily on infantry support rather than tank versus tank combat. It uses a crew of 6, which includes multiple machine gunners positioned around the hull. The main weapon is a 37mm gun mounted in the turret, supported by multiple .30 caliber machine guns. While the machine guns are effective against infantry, the 37mm gun quickly became outdated against armored targets. Armor ranges from 6 to 32mm, using riveted construction. It is powered by a Wright radial engine producing around 350 to 400 horsepower, with a top speed of about 42 kilometers per hour. The advantage of the M2 is its strong anti-infantry capability and decent mobility, but the disadvantages are major: thin armor, weak gun, and outdated design. Fun fact, the M2 never saw combat, but served as an important stepping stone for future US tank development. Tip: use it strictly for early support. Avoid any armored engagements. M3 Lee. The M3 Lee was developed as an emergency response to the need for a stronger medium tank. It entered production in 1941 and continued into 1942 with over 6,000 units built. The design is unique. It has a crew of 7 and features a dual gun system. Its main weapon is a 75mm gun mounted in the hull, paired with a 37mm turret gun. The 75mm provides solid firepower against both infantry and armor, while the 37mm adds flexibility. Armor ranges from 38 to 51mm, using riveted and cast armor. It is powered by a radial engine, producing around 400 to 450 horsepower, with speeds up to 40 kilometers per hour. The advantage is firepower. Having a 75mm gun early in the war is a big deal. But the disadvantages are obvious: tall profile, awkward gun placement, and poor whole gun traverse. Fun fact, the British used this tank extensively under the name Grant, modifying the turret design. Tip: position carefully. Your whole gun is powerful, but requires good angling to be effective. M4 Sherman. The M4 Sherman became the backbone of U.S. armored forces during World War II. It was introduced in 1942 and produced in massive numbers, over 49,000 units across all variants. It has a crew of 5, offering excellent coordination and efficiency. The main weapon is a 75mm gun, supported by multiple machine guns. This gun is effective against infantry and early tanks, but struggles against heavier German armor. Armor ranges from 50 to 75mm, using cast or welded construction depending on the variant. It uses engines ranging from 400 to 500 horsepower, with speeds around 38 to 48 kilometers per hour. The biggest advantage is reliability and versatility, but the weakness is armor and firepower against late war tanks. Fun fact, the Sherman was known for its mechanical reliability compared to many other tanks of the war. Tip: use mobility and teamwork. Don't fight heavy tanks alone. M4A1 Sherman. The M4A1 is a variant of the Sherman with a fully cast hull design. It was produced from 1942 onward in large numbers. Crew remains 5. It uses the same 75mm gun with similar machine gun support. Armor is similar in thickness, but benefits from rounded cast shaping, which can improve shot deflection. Engine power varies, but remains around 400 to 500 horsepower, with similar mobility. The advantage is slightly improved survivability due to its shape, but the core limitations of the 75mm gun remain. Fun fact, The cast hull gave the M4A1 its distinctive rounded appearance. Tip: use terrain and angles. Small improvements in armor can make a difference. M4A3 Sherman. The M4A3 is one of the most refined Sherman variants. Introduced in 1943, it features improved engine performance and reliability. Crew is still 5. It carries the same 75mm gun, or later upgraded versions depending on configuration. Armor remains similar, but is better arranged. It uses a Ford GAA V8 engine, producing around 500 horsepower, giving it strong mobility. The advantage is overall performance. This is one of the best all-around Sherman variants. The downside is still limited penetration against heavy tanks. Fun fact, the M4A3 became the preferred variant for US forces in later stages of the war. Tip: play it as a flexible support tank. Adapt to the situation. M4A3E8 Sherman Easy 8. The Easy 8 is a late-war improvement of the Sherman. Introduced in 1944, it features major upgrades in suspension and firepower. Crew is 5. Its main weapon is a high-velocity 76mm gun, significantly improving anti-tank capability. Armor remains similar, but with improved survivability due to better handling and stability. It uses a 500 horsepower engine with improved suspension, allowing smoother movement at speed. The advantage is balance, good mobility, improved gun, and better handling. The disadvantage is that armor still cannot match heavy tanks. Fun fact, the improved suspension allowed more accurate firing on the move. Tip: use mobility and gun power. This is one of your strongest medium tanks. M4A3 E2 Sherman Jumbo. The Jumbo is a heavily armored variant of the Sherman, introduced in 1944 with limited production. Crew is 5. It uses a 75mm or 76mm gun, depending on the version. Armor is significantly thicker, with frontal armor reaching over 100mm in some areas. Speed is reduced due to increased weight, but it still uses a 500 horsepower engine. The advantage is survivability. It can take hits that would destroy other Shermans. The downside is reduced mobility and sometimes weaker gun compared to threats. Fun fact, the Jumbo was often used to lead assaults and absorb enemy fire. Tip: use it as a frontline shield. Draw fire while others deal damage. M26 Pershing. The M26 Pershing represents the next step in US tank design. Introduced in 1945 with around 2,000 units built, Crew is 5. Its main weapon is a powerful 90mm gun capable of dealing with heavy German tanks. Armor ranges up to around 100mm using welded construction. It uses a 500 horsepower engine with speeds around 40 km per hour. The advantage is firepower. It can finally match late war German armor. The downside is late introduction and limited numbers during World War II. Fun fact, the Pershing was sometimes classified as a heavy tank during its early service. Tip: use it confidently. This is your best tank for direct engagements. US medium tanks weren't about having the biggest gun or the thickest armor. They were about balance, reliability, and adaptability. And in the right hands, that was more than enough to win.